Hi folks, today I've got something a little bit special for you. I've been very fortunate to get a demo copy of an upcoming game which is coming to Kickstarter today, if you're watching it Tuesday the 5th of May, and that is the Drowned Earth Ulaya Chronicles. Now this game is both an expansion to the existing miniatures game The Drowned Earth, if you're familiar with that, but it's also a standalone game too. It is played as either a solo or a co-op experience, and it's a little bit different to a normal miniatures game, where it's almost a board game, miniatures game crossover, where you basically are, the enemies are driven by an AI deck, and the story or the scenario plays out and you get to make different choices as you go which affect the scenarios that you play in subsequent games as well. So this first one I'm going to show you today is basically the intro one. It only uses 2 characters of the 4 that are available in the starting game, and it was really just to run you through some of the basic mechanics and let you know. I have also recorded a second scenario as well which follows on from this one, which I'll link here as well, and it basically allows you to see a little bit more in depth some of the other abilities and things that are in the game. Now I'm going to give you a bit of background story in this first one as well, so you can kind of see what's the background of what's the reason why we have these scenarios, and I may make some mistakes as well. This is a demo game. I haven't had it very long. I've played as many games as I could in the time I had available, but I may make some mistakes. However, even those aside, it will definitely give you a flavour of what you can expect. So, with no further ado, let's go straight into the playthrough. So this is the intro scenario, or the prologue scenario A up the creek. And as the Red River rushes south, the mighty Titanboa River calms somewhat, heading towards the ocean. As it does, the river narrows and the jungle closes in on you. It is then that disaster strikes. So the way the game is basically set up, I've set it up here already. We have, I should just clarify, these are just prototypes as well, so this is not necessarily indicative of what you'll get should you back the Kickstarter. But we have some terrain pieces here, and you can see they have some information on them. More on that later. And the scenario comes with this map basically, and we'll put a graphic up on the screen. And this tells you how to lay everything out. It also has a spawn table here as well, which will tell you that if you should need to spawn any dinos, what will come up. Now for this actual intro scenario, it's relatively straightforward. I'm going to be using this just to give you a little bit of an intro into how the different mechanics work. And then if you're interested in sort of seeing a more in-depth scenario, I'll film that as a second video and won't go as in-depth into what the different rules are in that one. So this one's an intro to kind of introduce you how to play. So without further ado, let's get started. So for this scenario, we're only going to be playing with the brawler here and the marksman. Each character has 1 finesse point, and we have a synergy reference card which has 3 points of synergy. The finesse point allows us to use special abilities that the characters have, and the synergy points allow us to change any number of die face to any other numbers, so not the symbols, and it can also be used to cancel all wounds from a single armor roll. I'll explain about symbols and stuff on the dice as we go through. So we start with the prologue deck. Let me just pop them onto the camera. So this is the prologue deck here, and I'll start by reading the intro to the setup. Doppled light casts golden pillars through the jungle canopy, dancing across the surface of the river. To either side, the vegetation thickens, and you are left with the impression that reptilian eyes stare at you from the gloom. So that is what we essentially have to do. Then basically we split in the scenario deck. We have 2. The orange ones are the heat deck, and the green ones here are the objective decks. Now they're in order, so don't look down through them, as that will kind of give away what's happening in the game. But the breakdown objective, the objective 1 says breakdown. At first you think the sharp snapping sound is a gunshot, but as the boat's engine splutters out, you realise the problems are far worse than that. You manage to pull the vessel to the side of the river and discover that the fan belt has snapped, which is where we find ourselves here on the boat. Upriver is some kind of mechanical wreckage, choked with vines and vegetation. Perhaps you can find a suitable spare part. So here is where we have the wreckage that we have to try and find. So basically the objective of the game so far is to get off the boat, get to this wreckage, see if we can find any spare parts. And then basically what we have here is you have some small text which says immediately flip this card when you are in base to base with the wreckage. So we know what the objective is. So unlike most miniatures games, it definitely has that kind of board game element of we are seeing the objectives coming out as we need to do them. Now the heat deck here, the orange ones here, this is basically says it's heat 1 is unwelcome guests. The screeching of unknown animals, the chitter-chattering of insects, even the oppressive heat, all points to one thing: you do not belong here. So each time you kill an enemy, we place 1 heat token on this card. And it says we immediately flip this card if there are 3 heat tokens on this card. So we have to remember to do that also. Now we start with basically we see the cards here, the marksman card and the brawler card. Each character has 2 actions, and you can use those actions to do a number of different things, and we'll talk about them as we go through. What we've got here on the board is we have 1 small Dilophosaurus here, which has already been exposed, and then these blue tokens here are basically kind of sort of warning markers, if you like, passive sort of ambush tokens, and we can try and discover those by using an action to discover them. And if we do, we basically flip them over. They also react to any movement and any noise, and there's an ambush card here which explains what happens. And I'll go through the game and you'll be able to see that kind of stuff. So we are going to start with the brawler. And the brawler is essentially going to come off the boat, across the water, onto land. And on the brawler's card, it tells us he has a movement of 6. And you half that when you're moving through any water as well. So we're going to move 1 inch to the edge of the boat there. We're then going to move another inch through the water, which is 2 inches, because it's doubled. So there's 3 to there. And then we are going to move another 3 to here. Now what happens is that basically if any of these ambush markers sense any movement within 5 inches, they will flip over. So this one is outside of 5 inches. We will certainly make sure that it is so we don't activate it. So this one's outside of 5 inches. This one is not. So it flips over to the red state. And we'll explain what happens. So the brawler has spent 1 point of his action points. Now during the game, each character, as I mentioned, has 2 action points. You don't have to do them all at once. You can use, as we are going to here, use 1 for the brawler. We're now going to activate and use 1 for the marksman. And she's basically going to try to recognize this marker here, which will then basically tell us what it is. Now recognize is an action that works within 8 inches. So basically she has line of sight to that within 8 inches. I'll flip that so you can see. So she's approximately kind of 7.5 inches away there. So she has line of sight to this. The way line of sight works basically is if any part of your base can draw a straight line to any part of the other base, and also models do not block, friendly models don't block it either. So in order to recognize this one, she's going to use her brain power, and essentially that is the intelligence. So you'll see here in the card the little brain symbol. She has an intelligence of 6. Now how we do this in the Drowned Earth is there are 2 dice. We have an attribute dice, which is the green one, and we have a feat dice, which is the orange one. I'm going to roll them separately now just to explain how it works, but in reality you'd roll them both at the same time. So the target number is 6. We need to get a 6 or below. So first one, she has a 6, which you can see here on camera. And then with the second one, she's got a 10. So the 6 on the attribute dice is enough to pass the test. However, it's more than a 6 on the feat dice, which means it is just a normal pass. Should this have been less than a 6 or less, it would have been classed as nailed it. And this allows them to do extra abilities and extra things. There's also the feat symbol on here as well. Should she have done this with a feat symbol, that basically would overrule this completely regardless of what that was, and you would have nailed it from that. So in this instance, when you recognize something, she's passed it. What we don't do is we replace that with something from the spawn table. We know in this one, rolling on a 1 to 10 is always a Dilophosaurus. So we know that there is a Dilophosaurus has appeared here. Now, ordinarily, when you discover something, if you pass it, you would place 1 confusion token the Dilophosaurus or the dinosaur. If you'd nailed it, you would place 2 on it. So we now have this Dilo here with 1 confusion token. A confusion token just means that when it comes to activate, it would discard the confusion token rather than doing its normal action. When dinosaurs are discovered, they don't automatically react. So that's basically the end of that particular action for the marksman. Now what the marksman is going to do is she's going to try and she's going to shoot the Dilophosaurus. If you look on her card, she has a bow which has a range of 11. We already know she's 7.5 inches away. And you also look on the card, she has a marksman ability of 7. So ordinarily you would have what's called a face-to-face roll-off. So the Dilo would be able to react by trying to dodge or to try and shoot back if it was in range. However, the range of a Dilophosaurus is only, if I can find it here, it has a range of 12, sorry. So it would normally shoot back. However, because it has a confusion token, it loses the confusion token and it doesn't shoot back during this combat. So this is just a straight hit. As I mentioned before, she has a marksmanship of 7. So again, we roll the 2 dice and we're looking for 7 or below. And here we've got a 5 on the attribute dice and a 7 on the feat dice. That means that she's nailed it. If you come across here and look at the weapon, there's 2 damage counters or 2 damage numbers for the weapon profile. There is 2 and 4. 2 is if you pass it, 4 is if you nail it. In that case, it would do 4 damage to the Dilophosaurus. We then roll 4 damage dice. So the Dilophosaurus has a defense of 3. So we'll have to roll these 4 dice and we need to get 3 or less on those dice. And here we got 2, a 9, an 8 and a 7. So the Dilophosaurus has basically has saved 1 point of damage. 3 have got through, and we can see on the Dilo card here it can only take 2 points of damage, so the Dilophosaurus is dead. So because of that, remember, every time we kill one of the dinos, we get a heat token. So we now have 1 heat token on the card. So we've now got one action point left, which is for the Brawler. And the Brawler is again going to move forward his movement. So remember, we're trying to get here to where this wreckage is. So I don't think we're going to be able to try and keep out of 5 of this one. We should be able to try and keep out of 5 of that one, except I think what we'll do, we won't. We'll move so that you can see what happens, because that's more interesting, isn't it? So he's going to move his 6 inches to here, which puts him just outside the edge. This is within 5. So basically any movement within 5, it would flip to the red side. This one is outside of 5. This one's outside of 5 as well, and obviously the one on the far side. But because the Dilo is already there, so it tells us on the card basically what the reaction is to noise within 8 inches. It will shoot 8 inches, up to 8 inches, and then move to get out of line of sight. So essentially these dinosaurs here basically kind of hit and run. That is how they act. Other dinosaurs have different kinds of reactions. So he is within 8 inches. So the Dilo will attack, and the Dilos basically use their own D10 dice. Now the Brawler here can normally react. However, he has no action points left, so unfortunately he can't react to this. So the Dilo's marksmanship is 6, so we need a 6 or less on this dice. And he's rolled, just see off camera there, he's rolled a 9, so he's failed the attack and nothing else happens. And the dinosaur will then move until it blocks line of sight, which is here. Now that's the end of the first turn. Now we basically mop anything up, any abilities that happen at the end of the turn, which we don't have any here. Ordinarily the dinos and the markers would get to act in an enemy phase, but in the first turn you don't have that enemy phase. So we're on to phase 2 now. First thing we do in phase 2 is we do anything that happens at the start of the turn, which nothing does. We then replenish our 2 action points back to our 2 characters. and we start with the enemy action phase. Now on the enemy action phase, what we do here is we move across the board from left to right and activate any sort of revealed dinosaurs or any revealed enemies. Now there's just the one here, so this is a Dilophosaur, and here is where we go through the AI deck. So we flip the first card, and we move down the card and do as many of the different actions that we can. So we go through the actions here, and what it tells us is we have to shoot within 8 inches to a target with line of sight. We don't have line of sight to a target, so we won't do that. And then it says to run 6 inches towards or away a model of line of sight and stop until it breaks line of sight and has hard cover. Now this cover here at the moment is only soft cover. This cover is hard cover. So the dino will run 6 inches, if it can make the 6 inches, until it's in hard cover. So we have a look here, and it can. So we'll move this dino and he will run to hide here out of cover. Next, that's all of our enemies have activated. We're now going to go into the player phase. Now the first thing we're going to do is we're going to activate the marksman here, and she is going to try and recognize this token here. Now remember, recognize is within 11 inches, is within 8 inches, which she is. And again, you use your intelligence for this. Her intelligence is a 6. So again, we roll the 2 dice. She passed it on a 5, but she failed to do it on her feet dice with an 8. So we do, this is another Dilophosaurus, which will come in and will enter play with 1 confusion token. It would normally get 2 confusion tokens if we'd defeated that. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is the brawler here is actually going to charge into the Dilophosaurus. So charge is basically making a full movement action, or up to a full movement action, with a free close range combat attack at the end of it. So we know his movement from his card is 6. He has plenty of space to get in. So he is going to charge into this Dilo. Now the Dilo doesn't get to react because it has a confusion token, so we take that away. This one can react because there was movement within 8 inches, so it would normally shoot, but it can't shoot through the hard cover here, and then it would retreat back to line of sight, so it will stay as it is. Now close combat works the same way as ranged combat, but instead of using the marksmanship score, we will use the combat score, which is a 7 for the brawler here. He's obviously a bit handy. And his weapon that he's using in close combat, he has a chain spear, which does damage 3-4. So 3 normally, 4 if it would to be defeated. So again, we roll the 2 dice. So we're trying to, you also get a bonus 1, when you charge. So instead of being on a 7, he's now on an 8. The Dilo doesn't get to react because it removed the confusion token. So we're now looking for 8 or less. Now what we've got here is we did an 8, which is enough to pass the test. Oh, move back on the camera. Had an 8. However, we also feated on this on the feat dice. So that means not only did we nail it, but we get an action point back as well. So it does 4 damage, and we get that action point back because we feated. So the Dilo, saving on a 3, we roll a dice, and it has saved 2 points here, 2 2s, and there's a 5 and a 10. So 2 points of damage go through. And if we look at the Dilo card again, it only takes 2 damage. So it only has 2 hit points, if you like. So we've killed another Dilophosaurus. We also place another heat token onto the card. So we're now going to move the marksman. So she has a movement of 6. So she's going to move an inch to the edge of the boat, 2 inches to cross the water, gets her to 3, and then the final 3 inches of her movement will take her to here. So next up, we're going to move the brawler. He's going to move into base contact with the wreckage, so we can see what happens there. Now remember, from the scenario card, we had to flip this card immediately when we're in base to contact with the wreckage. So what we've got now is we read the information on the back of the card. And this tells us, as you rummage through an old engine block, you marvel at its condition, as though it's made of materials which do not decay. But there is no time for such musings. You spy what you're looking for. Just as you retrieve a suitable part, you hear a high-pitched snuffling noise behind you. You reach for your weapon, spinning around, just in time to repel the predator's first attack. So it says this model has retrieved an engine part, and we spawn a Utahraptor juvenile in base-to-base contact with this model. So this brings in slightly more scary Utahraptor. And let's thematically spin him around. He wouldn't stand with his back to it, would he? So now normally what would happen when a model would spawn is it would then flip one of its action cards. However, because it's spawned in base-to-base contact, the only thing it will do is it will attack. Now, because this is spawned, it's a surprise attack on the brawler. He can't defend against it. On the Utahraptor juvenile, it has an attack of 6, or it has its combat of 6. So we will roll the attack for 6, and we got a 9. So the attack has failed by the Utahraptor. Luckily, our brawler has survived another day. Now what we're going to do is we're going to activate the marksman, and she is going to charge into the Dilo. Now it would be better, she has a better score for ranged attack. However, her ranged attack means she can't shoot into combat with a friendly model in close combat. So she's going to charge in, and because she's charging in, she gets +1 to her combat attack. So she's normally 5, that goes up to 6. However, it is an opposed roll. Because the Utahraptor is allowed to attack back. However, because she is outnumbered, because we have 2 of our heroes, the Utahraptor loses 1 from her combat. So it's 5 for the Utahraptor, and we're hitting on 6s for the marksman. So 6 for the Utahraptor and 2 and 6 for the marksman. That means the marksman has nailed it, and the Utahraptor has missed, luckily because of that crowding out. Nailed it damage for the knife that the marksman is carrying is 2. So the Utahraptor will roll 2 dice, trying to save on a 3 or less. And that one is up on the base. Let's roll that one again. And that is a 10 and a 7. So the Utahraptor takes both points of damage. Now Utahraptors are a bit stronger than Dilophosaurus. They have 3 points of damage. So that means that the Utahraptor takes 2 points of damage. So the marksman's now used both of her actions. You can't leave combat. You need to either dodge away, or you need to defeat what's there. Now the Utahraptor only has 1 sort of point of damage left that it can take. So the brawler will use his last action to attack in close combat. Again, the Utahraptor is locked with multiple attacks, so she will lose 1. So the brawler is on a 6, and the Utahraptor is on a 5. So 9 for the Utahraptor, 4 for the brawler on here, and 8 on the feat dice. So he's passed the test, but he has not nailed it. So his chain spear does 3 damage. We then roll 3 damage dice for the Utahraptor. Again, it's against 3, which is defense, and he rolled a 4, a 10, and a 7. That is a dead Utahraptor. Now, because we've killed another dino, we have to put the 3rd heat token onto that card, and when it said when we had 3, we had to flip that card. So it says any effort to remain silent would have been wasted effort. The predators of this part of the jungle have scented blood on the air, and they are coming. Flip all ambush tokens. So we have 3 ambush tokens here, which we will flip over. Now the next part of the card says, bushes begin to rustle. There is an ominous silence, and the jungle erupts into a cacophony of frantic noise. It will be wise to leave quickly. At the beginning of each turn now, place a heat token on this card. And it says flip at the beginning of the turn if there are 3 heat tokens on this card. So I also forgot to read out the next part of the objective as well. It says night is falling, and as the light fades, the jungle comes alive with the sound of dangerous wildlife. You really don't want to be caught out in the jungle at night. It's time to leave. You need to get back to the boat and fix it with the parts you found. The quicker the better. Also, everyone should probably get in the boat pretty quick, unless of course someone is going to be totally selfish. You may flip this at the beginning of the turn if a model with the engine part is on the boat with no enemies. So because I'm playing solo, obviously I want to try and get everybody off. If you're playing cooperatively and you're controlling different characters, who knows, you may want to leave somebody behind. So we go back to the start of the turn now. There's no, well, we do have a start of turn action now. It's to put a heat token onto the card at the start of turn. We then also replenish the 2 action points back to each character, and we start with the enemy turn. We have 1 enemy on the board here, so we will flip over a Dilophosaurus card. It says here that it runs 7 inches, and it's a green foot, which means it can't run through any light cover. So it'll run 7 inches towards line of sight or smell, which is basically sort of because it can smell something. It'll stop within 6 inches and hard cover. Now, because on this card it is a plus, some have like a slash. So for example, it says here, towards or away, the model which has line of sight or the nearest model. So you use whichever one you can satisfy. So that will be, it will run 6 inches towards this one. It will stop 6 inches away, I should say. So we can move 7 inches, we'll stop 6 inches away, plus in hard cover. However, it can't stop in hard cover if it runs 7 inches, stopping 6. So what you do is you basically satisfy as many of the actions as you can. So this dial here is going to run up to 7 inches while staying 6 inches away. So it's going to move to here. And then it is going to attack against this model here. Now, to do attack within 7 inches, which obviously we stop within 6 to a target. So the way the dial will do this is it will roll against its marksmanship, which is 6. Now I can use one of my actions to defend this, and I think in this case, I don't think I will. I'm not going to defend this one. So a straight roll, 6 or less, and it is a 10. It's failed, nothing happens. So we then take the next part of the card, which said it moves 6 inches through soft cover until it moves out of line of sight. So it's going to move to the other side of here, out of line of sight. Okay, so what we're going to do here then is we are now going to use one of the action points, and we're going to run our marksman back to the ship. She does not want to be left behind, so she has a movement of 6, which will get her to the edge here, and then we'll use her second point of action to get her onto the boat. We're then going to use a point of action for the brawler. He will move his 6 inches to here, and then he has enough movement from his second action to get back onto the boat as well. And they've managed to escape with the parts. So we've now satisfied the second part of the objective, and this says, you fumble furiously with the engine, locking the fan belt in place as the jungle begins to come alive. Finally, the engine splutters to a start, begins to churn with water, and you speed off just as a lumbering allosaur breaks from the canopy, roaring ineffectively in your wake. And then it says, did everyone escape on the boat? Read resolution 1A. Or did only one character escape? Read resolution 1B. So we then go into the card, and 1A is the resolution that we had, and it says you won. It may have been a close run thing, but you did it. You're on time to meet your rendezvous, and what's more, you feel as though the encounter sharpened you up for future dangers. All players, even those that didn't participate in this scenario, gain 1 finesse point and 1 XP. So you have to remember to keep a track of how many finesse points your character has, as these refresh at the start of each scenario, but synergy points are a finite resource and do not refresh at the start of each scenario. Use them wisely. So luckily we didn't have to use any of those. That means that we have the full complement for the next scenario. Thanks for watching my video. I hope that you really enjoyed it. And if you did, why not consider clicking on the suggested video below to see more of the work that I've done. If you'd like to support the long-term sustainability of this channel, why not consider checking out my Patreon, where you can pledge and support from as little as $2 a month. And there is lots of different tiers and bonuses, which will give you access to a private Discord server. It will give you free t-shirts, free mugs, a podcast every month, and a number of other things, including getting your name at the end of every video, like these awesome folks who already support me now.